Good evening. The Road Accident Fund has confirmed it wants to appeal a ruling in the Gauteng High Court that it was wrong to change the accounting standard that it uses. Under the old system, the fund had liabilities of over 300 billion rand. When it changed its accounting system, it only had liabilities of around 30 billion rand. But the Accounting Standards Board says it does not have permission to change its system. As a result, the Auditor Generals refused to sign off on the accounts of the Road Accident Fund. Khaya Sithole is an independent analyst and expert on accountancy. Khaya, good afternoon to you. What is the difference between these two accounting standards? Why does it matter if one uses the wrong standard?
Good afternoon to the viewers. So the simple distinction between the two accounting standards is that one is the International Financial Reporting Standards number 4, which is designed for insurance contracts, and the other one is the International Public Sector Accounting Standard number 42, which is designed for social benefit funds. Now, the issue at hand is that the Road Accident Fund has been using IFRS 4, which is the insurance contract standard, ever since that standard was issued. And the consequence of that is that under that particular accounting standard, anyone who is required to use that accounting standard is essentially supposed to estimate their exposure to claims and potential claims as they go along. In other words, as we're sitting here now, the Road Accident Fund has to assume that based on a trend map, there is a road accident happening, and that road accident will eventually be lodged to them as a claim, and there will be a payment. So what happens with that particular model is that you essentially start speculating what your claims profile might be and your claims liabilities, and cumulatively that it amounted to an amount of over 330 billion rand by 2021. On the other hand, if the Road Accident Fund is correct in insisting that it should be allowed to apply the alternative standard, which is the one that talks about social benefit funds, it only then has to cater for claims that have been validly lodged with it. In other words, it doesn't have to worry about the potential accidents that are happening right now as we speak, but only has to worry about claims that are then lodged with it, and those claims must then be valid in order for it to say, now we are responsible for honoring this claim. So if they were able to then switch to that standard, it would mean that based on what they had in their books at the point in time, then only 34 billion rand needed to be accounted for. So they then decided that that is obviously what they prefer to do. So they switched to this new accounting standard. Unfortunately, it is not easy for any public entity to simply decide it wants to adopt an alternative accounting standard. There is a process of approval and concurrence that involves what we call the Accounting Standards Board. And until the Accounting Standards Board gives you permission to switch, you actually cannot switch to a new accounting standard. And that is at the heart of the dispute.
Okay, so that's the dispute between them. If there isn't a proper assessment of the fund's financial position, could that mean that essentially it goes bust without us really realizing that this was going to happen?
Oh, it's been bust for many, many years. I think if anyone tries to imagine whether the Road Accident Fund will ever be able to honor claims, whether that's 330 billion rand, 34 billion rand, the simple answer is that it is not in a position to do so. And the reality here is that the business model of the Road Accident Fund is completely inappropriate in the sense that it is funded by the road accident levy. So when you and I fill up at a petrol station, a part of that then goes towards the Road Accident Fund. Now the problem is that the sum of the liabilities that have been accumulated over the years and the claims and the size of the claims that do get approved when they do go through that particular process is much higher than what the Road Accident Fund collects every single year. So it is a fund whose balance sheet has been completely insolvent for a very long time. And if this was any other normal private business, as somebody would have said, well, actually, this is not a sustainable way to run its operations. So that is really at the crux of the problem, in that until there is actually a business model that fits the nature of the problems that the Road Accident Fund seeks to address, or there is an amendment to the law that enables them to do things differently, it really kind of doesn't really matter which accounting standard they would be applying, because it's still going to indicate it's an entity in financial crisis, and that's the reality of what it is.
Okay, so, I mean, what kind of model could we use to change it then? I mean, is this one of those things that everyone can see is in trouble, but none of the politicians will touch it because it's too complicated and no one knows what to do?
It is a difficult one, because in a traditional insurance setup, what you and I would do, we'd approach an insurer and then we'd discuss what you refer to as an insured event. So that insured event may be the loss of my car or the loss of any other property. So you and I would enter into a contract with the insurer, and the insurer will say, okay, if that event materializes, this is what I'm going to compensate you for. So there is an awareness of what the potential exposure and the potential liabilities are. And that is essentially how every other insurance company manages to balance its books. It knows exactly what the exposure should be. And of course, if they feel that there is a possibility that they won't be able to honor enough claims, then they can simply come back to you and say, we think your premium needs to be adjusted in order to make sure that the books remain balanced. The Road Accident Fund, unfortunately, is not in a position to do the same because you and I do not actually sign individualized contracts with the Road Accident Fund. So it may turn out that you are at a bigger risk in terms of a potential car accident than I am. But the fund cannot make that distinction between the two of us. So when we go and fill up at a petrol station, get charged the same. So that inability to essentially discriminate between the different type of profile of clients is actually fatal to the entire modeling of an insurance business. But nevertheless, that is what the Road Accident Fund is stuck with. So the problem is that until you find a way of either capping the sum of liabilities that may be potentially paid out, or simply going back to the source of funds, whether it's the road accident levy or indeed another allocation from fiscals, you're not going to balance the books. And I think it is also an intersection of the legal structure under which the Road Accident Fund has been constituted, and also the simple question of the financial modeling that needs to be done differently in order for this to once again be a viable fund. And I'm not sure if we're ever going to get there.
So what's likely to happen now is we'll have this appeal. Whoever loses will probably appeal that. So we'll probably have 2 years of this. And then what happens?
Well, there'll only be one loser. Yeah, there'll only be one loser, of course. That's the Road Accident Fund. And the reason we know that the only loser with the Road Accident Fund is that at the crux of the issue is not the fact that the Auditor General is trying to prescribe to the Road Accident Fund what it ought to do. What the Auditor General is saying that they have the constitutional mandate to audit this particular institution based on the rules that this institution is supposed to apply in preparing its financial statements. So if the Road Accident Fund could ever get into a position of convincing the Accounting Standards Board in order to allow it to depart from the old accounting standard of IFRS 4 to the new accounting standard, the Auditor General will simply come in and audit what has been approved as that particular framework. So it seems that we are pursuing the type of litigation that has no logical endpoint because, again, if the Accounting Standards Board agrees with the Road Accident Fund, that's the conversation we should be having. The Auditor General is essentially the innocent bystander that has been thrust to the front of the litigation on the basis that she is the one that issued the opinion in 2021 and say, look, I've been told to audit you guys based on this particular accounting standard. You haven't applied it. So because you haven't applied it, I'm not in a position to offer an opinion that vouches for the validity or the transparency or the fairness of what you've prepared. And that's really what the problem is here. So it's not very clear what the point of this ongoing litigation is going to be if you're not getting the same people in the room to actually engage on whether there should indeed be a shift, and if that shift is going to be done, how should it be facilitated, and what the consequences would be for the historic audit reports.
Khaya Sithole, thank you very much indeed. Do appreciate the time. An independent analyst and expert on matters of accountancy.